Hi, everybody. I am Brian Murray. I'm the director of the Duke University Energy Initiative, and thank you all for coming out. I've been asked to give some closing reflections for the conference, but before I do that, I have the great privilege of handing out the prizes for the research poster competition. So you get a twofer with me. Okay, so there's 3 top prizes, and in the first time in the history of this contest, 3rd place is under dispute. So apparently there's a tie for 3rd place, and they're going to work it out later and let you know who the 3rd place winner is. Okay, so you heard it here first. But we do have a very clear 2nd place winner, and that is Tanorir Aloui from Duke ECE. Congratulations. Great job. And first prize is Kweku Gyamfi from Carnegie Mellon. Go ahead. Thank you. Congratulations, yes. And you get a big check. Great. Excellent. Thank you very much. Yeah. That was great. So upon reflection, the first thing I want to do is, this is a student-run event, which is really quite amazing. First of all, selecting the themes, getting the speakers, organizing everything is really a Herculean task. I can tell you this is something that they started working on not too long after our energy conference last November. So they've put a lot of great effort into this, and I want to thank them and have you join me in thanking them. And in that, they got a lot of great advice and counsel from the Ed Center here at Fuqua, Katie Cross and Dan Vermeer. And I really want to thank all of the speakers today. Every single one of you was just fantastic, from the keynotes to the panelists. It was really kind of scintillating conversation that you guys started, and thank you very much for coming and giving us your time and your talents. So, to the speakers. Okay, that's your last applause. Now you have to hear me reflect. Okay, so I've got 3 basic reflections, and I want to start with, I'm going to pivot off of Dan Vermeer's opening comments this morning, that the energy transition is planned, not a series of spontaneous shocks. And I would say at least the goals are planned. I think the pathway is going to take all kinds of strange turns. But that means that policy plays a really outsized role in what this transition is going to look like. Because the policy is what sets the goals and establishes sort of the priorities. And that's important. And it means it's also really important that we get the policies right. So Mark Florian, in his comments, pointed to the unique capital-intensive nature of energy investments. It takes a lot of money up front to get a lot of capital, and often it's going to be a multi-year period before you get any return on that capital. And oh, by the way, you have a lot of risks associated with those investments. So it's really important to get clear policy signals to drive that investment, or else it ain't going to happen. The policy signals may be not only just about the direct incentives associated with adopting the technologies, but how to de-risk the desired outcomes. So another key point in all this is that the energy transition really starts with the system that you have right now. Right now, we have a highly decentralized energy system, and I don't mean decentralized or decentralized generation. I mean it's a decentralized system where millions and millions of individual private decisions happen every single day that determine how energy is produced in this country and how it's used in this country. And that's the system that we have. So when we talk about a transition, it's a transition that happens within that context. So we hear a lot about how the energy transition is very similar to a moonshot or a war effort or the Manhattan Project. And in some ways, maybe the ambition of it is like that, but it's really different. Those are very top-down endeavors. You know, the government decides this is what we're going to do. We're going to build a nuclear bomb, or we're going to go to war, and we're going to send, 15% of the male population between 18 and 35 over to fight a war. That's a top-down decision and allocation of resources to achieve some sort of agreed public goal. And that's not the way it works with energy. Energy is very bottom-up. And the top-down part of an energy transition is the policy, as I alluded to, and some basic R&D, perhaps, from the government, but the rest is bottom-up. Another point on the transition is we need to expand the geography of our thinking on the energy transition. We're seeing really amazing changes here in the United States. I mean, we heard many times today, when the first energy conference happened 11 years ago, could not really have anticipated what the landscape would look like today, and I agree with that. But you need to put it in the global context, and so what we're seeing is a lot of disruption in the United States and Europe and places like that. But if you look at a global figure showing energy growth over the entire world, you're seeing these sort of interesting additions to renewables and new technologies on top of very, very conventional-looking growth, an uphill. It's an uphill growth of conventional technologies. So we're seeing a much different growth in the energy system in developing countries than we are in developed countries. And I think it's important to be mindful of that, especially as we bring 1 billion people into a modern electricity system. And it's especially important because a lot of this has been motivated from the very beginning of today's discussion about climate change and climate risk, which is a global problem. And so emissions that don't happen here could happen somewhere else, and that kind of undermines the goals of what we're trying to do here. The second point is that what's happening now in California bears very close attention. It's unfortunate for California that the timing of terrible events out there makes it, puts a fine point on what we're looking at here. But the fires that are happening in California are like a literal cauldron in which all the issues discussed today are in kind of violent collision with each other, whether it's climate resilience or mobility or electric utility business models. The mantra for decarbonization is decarbonize electricity and then electrify everything. Well, the policies in California have led to a very high penetration of renewables and even more on their way, but that's not really the issue with the fires right now. The real issue is reliability of the power system and the infrastructure, which is a function of an aging transmission infrastructure that's been around for 100 years, what we'll call imperfect land use policies. And I'm not referring to forest management, I'm also referring to the fact that sticking houses in places in California where they don't really belong because of the extreme fire risk, and now facing repeated severe climate threats. It's a bad combination of events. So at this point, PG&E really has little choice, arguably, I guess, but they have really very little choice but to have these intentional outages. And it's going to take tens to hundreds of billions of dollars to retool the infrastructure so that these risks go away to make it more resilient. So if we electrify everything, the reliability stakes are high, and the cost to make a reliable system are high to match that. The third final point would be the decarbonization of electricity is here to stay. Probably 10 years ago, we would have talked about it's kind of a nice goodwill play by a lot of utilities. We're going to offer, if you pay an additional tariff, we're going to offer green alternatives for energy. And that'll be sort of the beginning of the path. Well, it's not just a goodwill play anymore by utilities. As Gary Ratcliffe showed us, not a month goes by without a new state or a new utility declaring really aggressive renewable energy targets. And this is important. I mean, it's easy to declare targets, but when you think about utilities, as they move from the declaration of these targets to their IRPs, integrated resource plans, to actual metal and concrete in the ground. This is very real. That's not all that reversible. They're putting the infrastructure in place. If you contrast that with the government declaration, well, a governor can say, this state is going to hit 100% renewables by 2050, but governors get reelected, right? Or they don't get reelected, they get thrown out of office. So really pay attention to what the utilities are doing on the ground, because that's going to help sort of set what the future pathway looks like. And then finally, I can't think of a more exciting time for people to be starting their energy careers. As Barbara Berger pointed out, the energy sector is basically everything. So that means that if it's everything, that means there's a lot of great opportunity there. And she also points out, and it sounds like she and I got done with college right around the same time. So she said, no one back then worked for a small company of 5 to 8 people. And I just thought back to that, I'm like, yeah, I don't know a single person who I graduated college with who worked in an environment like that. But many of you are going to go into an environment like that, and there are really some exciting opportunities to do that. So continue to be inspired and continue to inspire the rest of us, and come back to the Energy Conference and Energy Week next year. So now I want to hand it back to Janine and Stuart and thank them for all of their efforts associated with this event as well.